Okay, so today we are working on the 12 bolt GM rear end that I have for this C10 truck. What you're looking at right here is a bracket setup that I purchased through Summit Racing. They make a bunch of different products. This is the bracket setup that will basically bolt on to your engine stand, and it'll allow you to basically support a rear end. I picked this kit up so I could put my rear end on here and then come in here and start to clean this rear end, sandblast it, drain it, kind of get this thing ready before I send this rear end off to the rear end shop. The idea that I have behind here is that I've got it on the stand. I'm going to release it after I tighten up a couple of bolts. I'm going to clean all this off. These perches for the factory shocks, I'm going to cut those off because we're not using those. I got one on this side and one on the other side. So I'm going to be cutting those off. I'm going to take my paint removal disc on my grinder and start to clean just all this surface rust off and get all this gunk off. I've got a tiny hand sandblaster that I'm going to use to basically sandblast and get into tight crevices, little pockets and stuff like that. Once I get the outside relatively clean, I'll be opening up the differential cover, draining the fluid, removing the clip, and I'll be taking off both of these drum brakes, and then it'll be ready to go over to the rear end shop. Okay, so we're back on the rear end, and this is what I got so far. I've gone ahead and cut off the shock mount on this side, and I cut off the shock mount on this side. So I was able to take those off with a cutoff disc on my grinder. Then I came with a grinding disc, and I just kind of grinded down the welds close, not all the way, just close. The grinding disc, it'll cut into this rear end, so you just want to take it down. So after taking it down, I took a flap disc to it, and you can see right here the flap disc did a nice job getting rid of those welds. Still got to do this side over here. As you can see, I just used that grinding disc just to kind of take this down and get it close, right? And now all I got to do is just take the flap disc to this and clean this up. So this is where we're at. We're getting closer. I clearly got to clean all this up before I take it over to my rear end guy, but this is where it's at. Just want to give you an update, and so far, so good. Okay, so I'm here at the rear end shop. I'm about to pick up my rear end. I got it done here at the rear end shop here in Livermore, and they put in a new limited slip differential inside the rear end, all new seals and everything. And we ended up going with a 3-7-3 gear ratio. The rear end, the 12 bolt rear end was also powder coated. So these guys were nice enough to take it all apart, send it over to my powder coating guy. Got powder coated, came back, and then all the internals, everything was done, redone inside the rear end. So let's go check it out. Boys, that looked beautiful. So this is what I had done. I had the whole rear end powder coated. I had the all new seals. 3-7-3 gears were installed in this with the positive traction rear end. So this is where it's at. Even got the yoke powder coated, so everything's looking good. I also got a new chrome differential cover down here, and they were nice enough to put on the rear bracket for the Watts link. So here it is right here. This weekend I'm going to be putting on the rear suspension. This is a 4-link with a 6-link cantilever airbag. This is made by Chris Alston. Right now I'm basically taking all the bushings out of the 4-link bars, and I'm lubricating them up. When I dry fit the whole truck, I actually just put the bushings in dry because I was only mocking up the truck at this time. So I'm going to be taking everything out. I'm going to be using the lubricant that Chris Alston provided in the entire rear end kit, and I'm going to lubricate all the bushings, put them all back together, clean them up, and I want to get the rear end bolted in with this 4-link kit, and I also want to get the Watts link reinstalled now that it's powder coated. Well, I think last night my camera battery died, so it cut off. I'm not sure where it cut off at, but what I did last night is I basically had the rear end up on the stands, and I put on the rear calipers last night. These are the CPP rear drum brake to disc brake conversion, 12-inch rotors, single piston, and there's a series of shims that need to go on to align the caliper up with the rotor. This morning, I've now moved the entire truck more centered to the garage, and then I picked up the rear end, and I've just kind of moved it on over. So with that being done, now I'm installing the 4-link bars. Originally, when I just put this together and mocked it up, I put everything in dry. I never really tightened down any of the bolts, just kind of put them in there finger tight. Now this go around for the final build, lubricating all these bushings, and I'm gonna be torquing everything down today. I'm working on the rear 6-link cantilever, and there's a bushing in here that I need to obviously remove this, lubricate it up, and then put it back in. There's a dog bone that goes on this guy right here. I'm just basically taking it apart, just punching out the studs, and I'll be removing the bushings and lubricating them up with the provided lubricant from Chris Alston. Once I have this put back together, I'll be reinstalling it on the truck for the final. So this is where I'm at. I've got the rear end completely done. I got the brake calipers on, the brake rotors on, and now we're about to put on the rear rims. So I just want to give you a quick look around of what this looks like. So we have the Chris Alston 4-link setup right here, going to the rear end. CPP rear brake disc conversion. Then we have the Chris Alston. This is the cantilever airbag. They call this a 6-link because you got the 4 links up front and 2 more in the back. So this would be the 6-link cantilever airbag setup, and this is designed to also lay the frame on the ground. Over on this side, same thing, nothing special. I've gone ahead and I put all the lubricant in all the bushings. After all the bushings were lubricated, I went ahead and tightened up all the bolts. These lower bolts for the U-bolts, the nuts for the U-bolts are torqued down to 60, and all of these bolts right here for the 4 links and those bushings, those were all torqued down to 45 foot-pounds. Same back here. So this is going to be a 45 right here. So now I'm ready to put on the rear tires and get this thing to a rolling chassis. So I'm now going to put you on fast forward so you can check it out. Now that I have all that installed, the next step is to pretty much get this truck on the ground. And the only way I'm going to be able to do that without the air management kit is I'm going to just revert back to the manual setup that I had before. You could see that I have a couple of air lines right here just going to a valve that I can fill up with my air compressor. Once I get the manual lines and valve all set up on the front, I can finally get this truck off of the cart, my makeshift body dolly, and it'll be on its own. It'll be a rolling chassis. Okay, so in the last clip, what I didn't do was put on the rear shocks. So as you can see, I got the rear shock right here and that one over there installed. I need to tighten up those bolts. Next step is to start to remove all of the wood framing I've got for this makeshift body dolly that I've got. So I'm gonna put you on fast forward, tighten those up, remove all this, and get this truck on the ground. Okay, so we're back on the C10 truck. Today what we're going to do is we're going to get the Watts link installed. The Watts link is this piece right here. This is the pivoting arm, and there is a couple of adjustable bars that I got to install. The important thing that I know that I need to do is make sure that my whole truck is at half ride height. That's where I want to set this up. So I've dropped the truck down to the ground, taken a measurement, lifted the truck all the way up. I got a measurement, and then I did a little bit of math and figured out what my half ride height is. Okay, the other thing that's important is that I got to make sure that the Watts link itself right here is centered on the rear end is centered with the frame. And how I do that is I'm going to take a measurement off the back of the brake rotor and take a measurement to the frame on both sides. And right now I did that measurement. I've got about 16 inches from my brake rotor to the frame, and on this side I got about 16 and a half. And I'm measuring that from the brake rotor to like the inside flat edge of the step notch. That's how I'm just kind of getting that for rough numbers. So I'm about 1/4 of an inch too far one way. So this back link right here has a couple of spacers on it. There we go. This back link right here has 2 spacers because the bracket is real wide. And then this guy right here, I need to lock him into the top of this Watts link, this pivoting arm right here. Okay, what I've done here with this link right here is I've gone ahead and I've put in some anti-seize and threaded both of these eyelets into this link bar right here. Once that's done, we're gonna take this guy and bolt it in. It's on?
Yeah. And I gotta put it in all of the
Just screw it to its hand tight, and you can't go no more.
Yeah, I can't go no more.
Okay, that's fine. We're gonna test this out.
There, Dad. Can I have a candy?
What?
Can I have a candy? Where's the bag anyway? Okay. Oh, snap! Oh, snap, Dad!
That's pretty good. Let the air out of the front.
Wait, oh.
Nice. When trying to get my fill plug out of the differential housing of my rear end, the first thing I did was take the 3/8 drive ratchet and try to get it out, and it was pretty tough. So I grabbed this super long breaker bar, right, slid it on this 3/8 ratchet and tried to break it loose, and all that did was strip the plug. It would not budge. The next step I did was grab this 3/8 to 1/2 inch drive, and I was able to get that in there, and I got my welder and I tried to tack weld this in. When I went to go use my 1/2 inch drive to break this loose, this just cracked, my welds broke off, and I didn't get any movement. I found this Allen socket that fit it closely. I tried to weld this, and then I tried to break this off with the 3/8 drive. Again, I just broke the welds, nothing worked. I went down to Harbor Freight. I got a set of 1/2 inch drive extensions. So I got the 1/2 inch to 1/2 inch, so I can grind it down to try to get the perfect size, right? Once I grinded this down and put this in there, I had a nice tight lock. So I got my impact right here, put this on here, and then when I went to go wrench it, all it did was spin and tear up the metal, and I got nothing. No movement, no nothing, and I wasn't able to break it loose. So I get out my air chisel, and I get in there on that plug. The plug is sticking out from the differential, about 1/8 of an inch, right? So it's really tight, it's in a tight spot. I try to hammer it to get it to spin. I get nothing. All I'm doing is basically chipping away, and I'm just ripping the metal of the fill plug, right? So I stop, I try to come from up above, I try to chisel that. Again, all I'm doing is digging into the fill plug. That's all I'm doing. Then I took the same piece right here, and I put it back into the plug, and instead of using my dead blow hammer to knock it in, I just got the my sledgehammer, and I just tapped my sledgehammer in, and I realized that the sledgehammer was actually nailing it in and really just forming itself. There was just a lot more force behind this piece as I hammered it in. So I got this knocked in. It just kind of locked in, which is real nice. And then I came in with my welder, and with that clean metal, I was able to weld, and I turned up the heat on my welder. I was able to get some real good penetration on this little extension to this fill plug. Anyhow, once it was welded, I jiggled it. It felt really tight, and I just simply took my 1/2 inch drive, put it on there, and boom. I think a combination of the heat, a combination of getting good penetration between the extension and the fill plug, that all worked out for me. So I hope you find this helpful, because if you end up get your rear end done and then you get it back home, whether it's powder coated, painted, or nothing, and you still can't get it out, if you strip that internal wrenching drain plug, my advice to you is to just get an impact socket over Harbor Freight and grind it down to whatever kind of fits, almost like a key. And once you get in there, you got to weld it. In the last video clip, you see me get out the fill plug that was stuck inside the differential housing. I got that out now. What I've done is I've gone ahead and I've ordered a new fill plug. I picked this up at Summit. This is a Mr. Gasket product, part number 3680. It's basically a 1/2 inch pipe thread plug with an external wrenching right here, which I'm going to use instead of the internal, because that's kind of what, didn't work for me last time. So this particular one actually has a magnet on it. So since I've got a new rear differential in here, my thought process is that as the rear end breaks in, as the fluid gets lost around by the ring and pinion, that any kind of metal shavings, as the braking procedure happens, maybe the metal will actually get trapped onto this plug right here after the rear end is broken in. So I'll talk about that here shortly, but for now, let's go ahead and get this done. So here it is. This right here is the old fill plug welded to this extension, And we're gonna put this one in today. As you can see, this is what we're going with right here, right? I'm just gonna use a little bit of anti-seize on the threads of the new fill plug. Okay, so now I'm ready to install the plug, right? It's got some of that on. Let's talk about the oil. The shop that installed the new True Track posi differential, they're recommending this oil right here, which is the 85-140. So this 85-140, they also specify that I am not to use synthetic. On this bottle, it doesn't say it's conventional, and it certainly doesn't say it's synthetic either. So I picked up a bottle and I went back down there. What he had told me is that on the fluid that we're looking for, it's got exceed service levels of all these different type of fluids. And what we're looking for is this API GL-5. So you can see all these these oil types right here. So that's the one that's for me, that is not synthetic, and that's what we're gonna use. He also recommends that I buy about 3 of these. The differential should take maybe a little bit more than 2, not quite 3. So pick up 3, and that should be plenty to fill up the differential housing. So we're gonna do that right now. So I'm just gonna siphon this in like a bottle, hopefully without spilling it everywhere. Like a baby. Oh, that's disgusting. Oh. Okay. All right. Bottle number 2. Okay. Looks like we've got fillage. So here it is. This is the idea. You just kind of fill it up. As soon as it starts pouring out, you should be full. So that took just about 2 bottles. For right now, this is what we're gonna go with. We're gonna let it continue to pee a little bit and clean it up for the plug-in. Okay, I'm just gonna put this fill plug in now, and I'm gonna get this done. All right, so now I'm ready to tighten this up. Okay, I'm happy with that.
Don't lose my knife.
Boy, am I glad that's done. I'm really happy to finally get that fill plug out. The rear end's done. It's all new inside. It's got new fluid. It's installed. The rear suspension is done. And man, I could really put a large check mark on this part of the build. So couple of tips. If you have a rear end done, make sure that that fill plug is taken out so you don't have to run into the issues that I ran into with trying to get that thing out, particularly when it comes to powder coating. If you have it powder coated, it's gonna really lock in those threads, as you see that I had to deal with here on my builds. One more thing about this rear end is that there is a break-in period. So the rear end shop recommends that basically break in this rear end for somewhere around 200 to 300 miles. Seems like quite a bit, but what he's saying is that there is a coating that's on the ring and the pinion, and that needs to wear off. I need to be driving it somewhere around 200 to 300 miles, and he does not recommend freeway miles. He recommends something like around not exceeding 40 miles an hour and driving it around and getting everything nicely broken in. He also did mention that I might notice some type of odor. It is the break-in odor. Basically, what he says is that the operating temperature of this rear end is going to be about 190 degrees. That's the normal operating temperature of the rear end. It's not uncommon to see that the rear end reach temperatures of up to 250 degrees as it's breaking in. And when that happens, I might smell something in there. That's just everything just, I guess, molding together. So that's what I'm supposed to expect. 200 to 300 miles, don't go over 40 miles an hour. There's gonna be some odor. It's gonna heat up, maybe up to 230 degrees. And once I've passed that break-in period, then it'll just run at its normal operating temperature. Once again, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I got a lot of really cool things coming up to show you on this truck. So stay tuned and watch out for the next video.